Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We will get started in just a minute while we wait for some more people to join. Thank you for your patience. Just another minute or so. Okay, great. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much to everyone for joining today. Our Raising Ambition Through Partnership webinar series. This topic is on NDC and LEDS alignment, paving the way for a net zero 2050. And I just have a few quick housekeeping and logistical things to go through, and then I will hand it over to our speakers to start. So we are pleased to offer interpretation in both Spanish and French for this webinar. So if you would like to listen to the webinar in a language other than the default language of English, please follow these instructions. At the bottom of your Zoom window, you can click on the icon that looks like a globe to access interpretation settings. Once you click on the interpretation icon, a pop-up window will appear showing the available languages for interpretation, and then you will select your preferred language from that list. In order to hear the interpretation clearly, you then can mute the original audio, and then you should be able to hear it more clearly. I will also put these instructions in the chat. And some housekeeping as well. Please use the chat function throughout the sessions to share comments, resources, or engage with other participants. And you can also introduce yourself in the chat and share which organization and or country you are joining from. But if you have specific questions for the speakers as we go through the webinar, please use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen as well. It is 2 chat bubbles with Q&A there where you will be able to put your questions. All of the materials from today's session, including the PowerPoint and any highlighted resources, as well as the recording, will be shared with you at the end by email following the session, and the recording will be added to our NDC Partnership YouTube channel. So we're excited to have you, and thank you so much for joining. And I will hand it over to Mariana from the NDC Partnership Support Unit to begin our session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sarah, can you hear me okay? I think we're good.
Yes, you sound great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Mariana Panuncio-Falma, and I'm Country Engagement Director for the NDC Partnership. And I'm really pleased to welcome you to our Raising Ambition Through the Partnership webinar. The NDC Partnership is co-hosting this webinar series together with GIZ, UNDP, and WRI to highlight successful examples on mitigation and adaptation ambition-raising efforts while promoting knowledge exchange and learning across the partnership. Today, we will focus specifically on NDC and LEDS alignment. Under the Paris Agreement, countries are expected to present nationally determined contributions, NDCs, that include new targets for 2035 on February 2025. This next round of NDCs, now popularly referred to as NDCs 3.0, represent a critical opportunity to course correct and to put the world on track to meet the Paris Agreement goal of 1.5. NDCs 3.0 are expected to demonstrate increased ambition with respect to the current NDCs and to be informed by the outcomes of the global stocktake. Along with the NDCs, long-term low-emission development strategies, known as LEDS, are important tools for countries as well. Why? Because they incorporate the long-term goals and strategies that are needed to meet the Paris Agreement temperature goal into their national planning. So whereas NDCs allow countries to prioritize actions that need to be taken in the short and medium term, the long-term strategies provide the longer-term vision for increasing countries' abilities to mitigate and adapt to climate change. They help identify the mid and the long-term policies and investments that can drive systemic changes that balance emissions reductions, economic growth, climate resilience, and a just transition. So it is important to show and to work with these two tools, understanding that they complement each other. Today's webinar will highlight the importance of strategies for aligning NDCs and LEDs. They will offer insights into the methodologies and the resources that are available to support countries in aligning their strategies with national development goals, and in so doing, ensuring a just transition to net zero. And they provide information. Today, we will also provide information on available resources for countries to develop both of these policy instruments. So today's webinar will flow as follows. So first, we will start with an introduction to IDRI's framework for alignment. Then we will learn about the NDC Partnership's global call for NDCs 3.0 and LEDS. We will then explore how the recently launched NDC 3.0 Navigator can be leveraged to support alignment. And to explore how this can be useful, we will have a specific case study from Jamaica. We will also hear about GIZ's support project for the implementation of the Paris Agreement, or SPA. And then we will provide a space for questions and answers to allow for learning and knowledge exchange among participants. I encourage you to pose your questions freely and openly in the chat along the way, and also engage in an active discussion once we have that portion of the session today. What we want first and foremost is for this webinar to be useful for each one of you as you work through the challenges of aligning these two critical policy instruments. We hope that today's session will be helpful and will inform your efforts to deliver high quality, ambitious, implementable, and investable NDCs. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce you to Henry Weisman, Director of the Deep Decarbonization Pathways Project at the Institute for Sustainable Development and International Relations, IDRI. So with that, Henry, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariana, and thanks to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share the work that we are doing in the context of the deep decarbonization pathway analysis. And at the end of the presentation, I will direct you to a couple of publications that we will publish that are not available yet, but that will be made available in the coming weeks, where you can find more details about what I will be presenting today. So just to quickly start before entering into the topic, just a couple of words, and sorry, I will share full screen, that's better. A couple of words about who we are, what is the Deep Decarbonization Pathway Initiative. So we are an international network of in-country experts. So on the left-hand side, you have a map of the countries in which we operate. So in dark, the countries in which we have currently active teams working with us, and elsewhere, some countries in which we've been working in the past. Maybe the important point to flag that when we work with a country, we mean that we have in this country one or several partners, research partners, who develop analysis for their country. And I will come back to that when discussing the approach. But the spirit of what we are doing is to be country-driven, country-led, and country-owned, meaning that the analysis that's being developed aims at capturing the specificities of each country's circumstances, and to be led by partners in this country as a core condition to make sure that the analysis that we develop is relevant to the country discussion. So we are a network. IDRI is playing a role of coordination. So it's in this capacity that I'm speaking here today and sharing the insights of what we are doing. And we are supported by a number of international research and strategic partners, the NDC Partnership being obviously one of the very important of those strategic partners. Concretely, the activities, without entering into the details, combine the fact of developing analysis. So we develop pathways, scenarios to the long term that explore the interplay between reaching carbon neutrality and achieving national development objectives in the country. We also conduct some engagement at the national level. So the purpose is not only to develop analysis, but to make sure that the analysis is being used and being useful in the context of national policy discussions. And one of the important characteristics of IDRI, one of our DNA, is to have some entry points into the international discussion, notably in the context of the UNFCCC, but not only, and making sure that the messages that emerge from this country perspective can be communicated at the international level. And this interplay between national and global scale is one of the critical elements. And it's in this capacity, notably, that the DDP was initially created in 2013, so just before the Paris Agreement, notably to promote the idea that working on long-term strategies at the national level would be a very important aspect of the ambition circle, and something that's been reflected notably in Article 4.19 of the Paris Agreement. So that's who we are. So what is here? The framework that we want to propose for linking NDCs and long-term strategies. And here, basically, there is no super complex structure, but we feel that it's important to recall that enhanced NDC will have to come from the confrontation or the articulation between, on the one hand, the national realities. So what are the past, current, and planned goals, aspiration, trends, policies, the reality of the country. And that's something that obviously is critical. And on the other hand, an acknowledgement of the long-term climate goal. And we know very well that when we want to go towards the achievement of these long-term goals, it will, in some cases, require some drastic changes as compared to the national current trends. And it's confronting the two that will be important if we want to develop enhanced NDC that are both ambitious, but also actionable. And that's this confrontation that matters. And that links to highlight that facilitating this alignment, enabling this alignment, depends on the one hand on the way the questions, what are the concrete questions that you should be considering when developing your NDC, and what is the process that you put in place. And what I'd like to do in the next 5-ish minutes of this presentation is to give a sense of these three main blocks. What are the features of the LTS that can make it useful in this context? What are some of the key questions that we think could be important aspects to focus on, and the process, the characteristics of the process to be put in place. And again, I will go very high level here in the limited time, but would be happy to go more in depth either in the discussion or in follow-up discussions. So first thing, we need to acknowledge that it's not any LTS that could be useful in the context of this enhanced NDC, but there are some characteristics of LTS that need to be revealed, that need to be followed if we want the LTS to be useful. And here we've listed a few of them. I will go through them very quickly. One, the LTS should explicitly analyze the interplays at different time horizons. So the LTS is not only a tool to explore the long term, it's a tool to explore the short-term implications of the long-term transition. The LTS, it should also be a tool to explore all the economic system and their interplays so that we can have a consistent, sectorally detailed and economy-wide picture. And this interplay between sectors transformation and economy-wide is critical to trigger transformations. It's important that the LTS is also an opportunity to go into the details of the drivers of those transformations as a core condition to derive recommendation. It's not a high-level description of the trends that can be sufficient, but the LTS should be an opportunity to go really to open the box and to understand what is underlying the transformation that are deemed necessary to reach the goal. The LTS, maybe contrary to the NDCs, should be an opportunity to consider different options. It's a space that should be a free space to explore a range of possible futures and their differentiated impact. So it's not only selecting what would be the best, but also highlight the key different options to reach ambitious goal, and to clarify the challenges and the opportunities attached to each of these different options to inform eventually decision making. The LTS could also be an opportunity to insert the national transition in the global picture. And here, that's a very important aspect, that very often what can be done at the national level depends a lot on the assumptions that are either explicit or implicit on what's happening at the global level. And the LTS, the LTLEDS could be a good opportunity to make explicit those international conditions that can eventually become some clear guidance as to what are the requirements for the country to be able to go to the most ambitious transformations. And finally, the LTLEDs, process-wise, should be an opportunity to conduct an inclusive and coordinated process. Well, I will come back to this point later on, because that's also true for the NDC, but that's even truer for the LTLEDs, and the need to have cross-ministerial exchanges, to have enhanced ownership by a diversity of stakeholders is a core feature of the LTS. So here we've listed a few characteristics, and when developing an LTLEDs, following these characteristics would eventually enable the LTLEDs to be more directly useful to the process that I was describing earlier of confronting these requirements for the long-term transition with the national realities and eventually turn them into concrete decisions for the NDC. So that's for the features of the LTS. Moving to some key questions that we feel could be assessed when trying to analyze the alignment on content between the NDC and the LTS. And here, I will go through them. You will see that it's no big surprise, but maybe it's a way to structure the way the confrontation between the national reality and the LTLEDs could be organized. So how have you integrated net zero and climate resilience strategies and targets in the NDC? What are the explicit short and medium-term targets that you've included as a milestone towards a long-term transformation? What are the concrete actions or policies that are proposed in the short to medium term to align with long-term neutrality? Which of the global stock take outcomes have you included, and how? Maybe stopping 1 second on this specific point, the global stock take that issued some very important recommendations at the end of last year provide some global guidance, but we also need to acknowledge that translating this global guidance into country relevant insights requires dedicated work, and that being able to have this country-driven analysis of what the GST's outcomes mean for the country perspective is something that requires dedicated work, and the consistency between what is put in the national NDC and this global goal is not straightforward, but is really needed to ensure the consistency between the long-term goal and the national commitments. And finally, one thing that I've mentioned quickly, but I want to go back to, is that the NDC should be an opportunity to highlight the international cooperation requirements that would be needed for the country to be able to go to the most ambitious actions. And we know very well one of the key conclusions of the analysis that we've done in many countries is that many of the opportunities for ambitious and actionable transformation depends on what's happening at the global level. And that's something that could be critically highlighted in the NDC. So making sure that these elements are made explicit is probably one of the important questions to be asked when assessing the process. And finally, one last thing I want to stress is about the process, because if you have these elements from the LTLED, if you have this question that you want to organize, then the question is, in which context do you analyze this aspect? And there are 3 main characteristics that I want to highlight that would be core characteristics for the NDC process that would enable this, facilitate this alignment. One is coordination. The question is, who is in charge? what coordination between the mandated institutions, what are the timelines, to what extent do these different aspects relate between the LT-LED and the NDC. We know very well that it's not necessary that the two processes are conceived together, and making sure that there is some coordination is super important. It's also super important on the analytical side to make sure that the analysis that's being developed has some consistent underlying assumptions. The second aspect is the question of inclusion. So the process, what are the stakeholders that are consulted in the two processes? What are to what extent are they the same? To what extent are the insights provided, for example, by stakeholders in the LT-LEDs, be taken into account in the design of the NDC? So communication in the stakeholder consultation is critical. And finally, coherence, not only when it comes to concrete implementation, is something that really matters. And that's something that will condition a lot to what extent the NDC is effectively actionable. So I want to stop there, just coming back to this overall framework that articulates these three blocks that I was discussing. And here, as promised, just want to announce two publications that will be coming. One on the last week of September, that will be a guide for this NDC LTS alignment that will be published together with the 2050 Pathways platform. And second, what we call the DDP annual report that will focus this year on the alignment of short-term country actions with long-term goals, so directly related to what we were presenting, which will provide kind of the, let's say, the research side of this discussion, emerging from modeling insights from the work that we've been doing in 10 countries, mostly large emerging countries, but not only. And with that, I will stop there, thanking again the organizers for giving the opportunity, and all of you for being there, and very keen to discuss further, either now or in a follow-up. I've put my email, don't hesitate to reach out if you want to continue the discussion afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Henri, for that very insightful presentation. Good morning, everyone. I'm Julian Baker-Gallegos. I'm the project manager for NDCs 3.0 and LT-LEDs at the NDC Partnership. And I am going to be sharing my screen momentarily. Just making sure, can everybody see my presentation? Yes, great. Okay. So today I'll be sharing some information about the partnership's offering with respect to NDCs and LT-LEDs development. I do want to make sure, can you confirm, Sarah, if you're seeing the screen in presentation mode?
Yes, it looks great.
Okay, great. So if we're all here today, I think we can all recognize that NDCs and LT-LEDs more effectively aligned with existing national and sectoral development strategies and priorities are a powerful starting point for translating countries' climate commitments into investment actions. In order to close the mitigation and adaptation gaps identified by the global stocktake, countries really need to enhance the ambition of their climate commitments in the short term through their NDCs, and in the long term as well through their long-term low-emission development strategies. We also know that the needs that countries have to be met, and partners need to scale up their commitments to climate action to support these needs and deliver on the goals of the Paris Agreement. I do want to do a very quick run through. Henri has already done a much better job than I could with his technical expertise on the importance of these two instruments, but I did want to emphasize a few things. Nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, as we'll continue to refer to them, are country self-defined national climate pledges under the Paris Agreement, and they are the basis for the commitments going forward. They are the baseline departure that will drive accelerated implementation of plans, policy strategies, and help unlock finance at scale. So these NDCs that are established to be submitted every 5 years are meant to increase in ambition and also consider a few elements that can inform how implementation should happen. I do want to flag specific requirements for NDCs, just from a technical perspective, to make sure that everybody is clear on these points. NDCs do have a mandatory submission by early February 2025. and are expected to demonstrate a progression beyond the previous round of NDCs. They are encouraged to incorporate an end date of 2035, or to consider targets that are to be met by 2035, that are and that consider economy-wide emissions reduction targets covering all greenhouse gases, all sectors, and ensuring that all of the targets are in alignment with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. They are also encouraged to provide information on how the preparation of the NDC has been informed by the outcomes of the global stocktake, as Henri was pointing out earlier, and to provide information on how they will contribute to that temperature goal. Finally, and what has us all gathered here today, is they are encouraged to be aligned with a country's long-term strategy, as well as with relevant national instruments, and to provide information necessary that will provide clarity, transparency, and understanding, and use that's adopted for accounting approaches. So something that's really important for us to consider is how NDCs need to fit within the broader scope of domestic policy. This slide illustrates how NDCs can fit in it and consider relevant national development plans, sectoral development plans, long-term low-emission development strategies, national biodiversity strategies and action plans, voluntary national reviews, sustainable development goals, and all of these different policy instruments that are relevant for thinking about ways in which to make this sustainable within the national landscape. Ensuring that climate ambition is based on or aligned to national priorities is expected to accelerate their implementation as you have buy-in from the broader policy and government landscape. And ensuring that climate priorities are integrated into wider planning helps us avoid lock-in to unsustainable technologies or processes that may impair the country's ability to implement their development goals. I'm providing here a very quick introduction to what needs to be considered within long-term low-emission development strategies. In the interest of time, I'm not going to dive too deeply into this, as Henri already covered some of this. But what we do want to make sure is that there are synergies and that potential co-benefits between both instruments are identified and very clearly incorporated across the board. These strategies provide a roadmap for transitioning to a low carbon and climate resilient economy, and typically aim for a net zero 2050 target. In terms of practical measures that we can take for aligning NDCs and LEDs, it's important to consider that the alignment should happen for 4 reasons. It ensures consistency and coherence in national development strategies. It enables integration of national policies. It contributes towards enhanced climate ambition, and it encourages investment. Some strategies that can help us promote NDC and LEDs alignment including long-term targets in the NDC and using the NDC as an interim milestone. Aligning NDC and LEDs emission trajectories so that we're maximizing the efficiency of modeling tools rather than recreating them for both instruments, or perhaps even having some that differ in their approach that don't allow us to reconcile both instruments. It's important to also align with a just transition to net zero so that we're ensuring that there's sustainability across the population by considering long-term development goals. Aligning short-term actions with long-term goals will allow us to address misalignment and hopefully also build a more robust approach so that when there are government transitions, we don't have as much of a disruption. We also should aim to align stakeholder engagement activities and governance mechanisms so that there are common working groups that are cross-pollinating. This can be challenging on the ground. We've seen many examples of long-term strategies centralized in one ministry as opposed to another, but the difference that it makes when you do align these 2 processes is important. And then it's important to also provide information on how the NDC is aligned with LEDs so that we're promoting transparency across the processes that both instruments follow. And now moving on to specifically what the NDC partnership offers, as countries set out to design implementable finance-ready NDCs that are also aligned with their LEDs, the NDC partnership is ready to support. So specifically, I think most of us on the call already know this, but the NDC Partnership was established as a global coalition, bringing together developed and developing countries as well as institutional partners to deliver on the ambitious climate action that will help us achieve the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. Launched in COP 2022 and 2016, the partnership was founded on the idea that technical assistance, expertise, and financing for climate action were not being deployed in the most effective or coordinated way. And we are attempting to maximize efforts to align and minimize duplication so that we can achieve these global commitments with what are already limited resources. Here's a quick summary of what the partnership has accomplished to date. The partnership, as mentioned, was built on the premise that by acting together, we can achieve more. We mobilize or align existing partner resources to support country needs. And in this manner, we have supported 92 countries, leveraging support from 186 partners and amounting to approximately 1.7 billion of technical assistance. So going specifically into the offering that the NDC Partnership has right now is in the form of the Global Call. It is the Global Call provides dedicated resources and expertise for countries to align, update, and enhance their nationally determined contributions and long-term strategies in line with the Paris Agreement. It has been active since 2023 and will run until 2025. While we do have a submission date of February 2025, we are aware that a lot of countries are likelier to be submitting their NDCs towards the end of 2025. So the Global Call will remain active through Q3 of 2025. So that'll be around the fall of next year, the northern fall. And to give you just a sense for where we are today, in this graph that you see on the right, on the left side, you have a breakdown of the different regions that have requested support through the Global Call. And on the right side, you have a mapping of whether those requests focus on long-term strategies, NDCs, or both. So as you can see, we have 67 countries that have requested support through the Global Call as of now. There's about a 325% increase in demand for NDC 3.0 support. And this is, or sorry, this is not since March. This is since the beginning of the Global Call. And of these, 30 are also aiming to develop their own LT-LEDs. A total of 46 countries are seeking support for LT-LEDs development specifically. And 75% of these are focused on the LT-LEDs instruments as opposed to just the long-term vision. 10 countries currently are working on developing requests to the Global Call. And we foresee that by the end of this year, we might be in a position where some 75 to 80 countries will be accessing Global Call support. As of today, 52 countries have received support to either fully or partially address their needs, and 15 remain fully unsupported. We have a vast majority of these countries supported by UNDP and GIZ. These are key players that are leading the way in overall NDC and LT-LEDs development, but we also see participation from over 20 partners. So this includes partners such as AFD, IDB, IRENA, and you can see some other names here, including WRI, Climate Analytics, and 2050 Pathways, which we work closely with. We have about $61 million requested through the Global Call, of which 15 million have already been confirmed or deployed. 23 million are in indicative support, which means it's a support that's in the process of materializing and which we expect would be deployed within the next few months. And 23 million remain unsupported, and we are actively working towards ensuring that all of the countries that have submitted requests through the Global Call receive support of some kind through the partnership. Here you can see a mapping of the different partners that are supporting the Global Call. And I wanted to close with some insights that we have on country plans, needs, and challenges in the forthcoming year. As countries have expressed interest to submit their, or have shared with us their intent to submit an NDC 3.0, we know that at least 165 countries will be submitting an NDC. 25 of these have confirmed that they intend to submit by the first quarter of 2025, but almost 140 will be submitting by the end. So we're expecting to be continuing to work on this for the foreseeable future, at least for another year. And what I do want to flag here is that as more and more countries demand this support, we will be needing partners and development partners to step up to be able to meet that demand. Here's a very quick summary of our process for engaging with the Global Call. We have the Global Call aligns perfectly with the country engagement process that we already have in place. So we ask countries to submit a request for support form that we then review with the collaboration of technical partners and provide feedback on to make more potentially more appealing and more robust for partner engagement. Early on, we did have this option of pre-screening forms. So in countries where, for instance, you might not still be fully clear on what the needs are around NDC or LT-LEDs development are, or you would want to have closer collaboration from an early stage with partners, we encourage the submission of a pre-screening form so that then that development of the request can be done in collaboration with our support unit or with a partner. Once that request is formulated, we circulate it across the, at this point, almost 100 institutional members of the partnership so that they can respond. And then once those responses are received, we connect the country and the partner to ensure that support is materialized. In cases where no partners are stepping up and there is absolutely no alternative, we do have the Partnership Action Fund to support. This is a last resort only fund that we really make available only when there is certainty that no partner can step up to implement. And the PAF is available to make financial resources available to those who have the technical expertise to be able to provide the support for countries. And it's specifically available to members of the partnership. Once this support is materialized, then we have an agreement on what the specific needs are and which partner or partners will be supporting this work. We develop a joint work plan, which is a work plan that's meant to align all of the different partners that will be providing the support and make it easier to track the progress and to ensure that there's clear division of labor across the partners engaged, so that both government and partners can be on the same page around expectations. And then finally, we move on to implementation and reporting, where we do that tracking of that support that's in place. At this point, I just want to share very quickly that we do have a landing page where you can access all of these resources. It includes a brochure that's also available in Spanish and French, and it includes a link to this PSF or the pre-screening form that I alluded to earlier in my presentation, so that you can use it to submit your request to the partnership. With no further ado at the moment, I just want to leave you with the NDC 3.0 Navigator presentation. So we have on the call Maya Rubin, who is one of the brilliant minds that led the NDC 3.0 Navigator development. And she will be sharing with us some information on how the Navigator can be used to specifically align NDC and LT-LEDs support. And we have participation from Tanike, he's our NDC partnership facilitator for Jamaica, who will be using their example and their experience to make practical examples of how the Navigator can be used for these purposes. So I'll hand over to you, Tanike.
Good morning, everyone. I am pleased to be here this morning to represent and give an example of Jamaica's experience with our NDC and LT-LEDs alignment. Jamaica completed its LTS late last year, and with hopes that it will be going through cabinet actually within the next few weeks. But we're also currently undertaking the process of updating our nationally determined contributions with hopes of being one of the first 25 countries, as Julian spoke about, that will be submitted in the first quarter, because that is our goal. And with that, we've also received assistance through the Global Call, actually, to engage consultants through 2050 Pathways and who have hired the CLG team to carry out a cost-benefit analysis and investment plan that will be undertaken through UNDP for the LT-LEDs. These activities respond to Jamaica's commitments under the Paris Agreement, which includes the development of an NDC and LT-LEDs to guide efforts towards implementation under the Paris Agreement. The alignment of Jamaica's LT-LEDs and NDC work is crucial for effective planning and implementation of climate action at home and compliance with international commitments. So in order for Jamaica to deliver upon these ambitious targets, we have to be able to identify the gaps and the barriers that were in our LTS and find ways to address these in order for us to pave the way for a resilient and sustainable future for Jamaica. The LTS highlighted recommended actions across a varied whole of society, economy-wide subsectors such as energy, transportation, waste, critical infrastructure, tourism, population, and health. And what we're looking to do now with the cost-benefit analysis and investment plan is to translate these strategic goals and actions into projects and funding requirements. So the investment plan will outline financial mechanism, potential funding sources, and stakeholder engagement strategies necessary to implement the identified measures. So these synergies that we're looking for our cost-benefit analysis and also with our investment plan is so that we can move from not just action, but into implementation. And that's why it's so important for us to continue our partnership with the NDC Partnership, along with all of its members, so that we can find sources that can help us to achieve upon these goals. And with this, we're really excited to be able to engage with the tool to see if it is that we can find solutions that we can also bring towards the different stakeholders or consultants who are currently working on our NDCs, consultants currently working on our CBA, to see how we can bring all of these synergies together and to find routes. So I'm very pleased to be with Maya today for her to show us how is it that we can do this. So I will move on to Maya.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tanique, and very useful to hear about the circumstances of Jamaica, and hopefully we can use those national circumstances to use the Navigator to guide us towards some relevant opportunities that could be leveraged to help align the NDC 3.0 to the LT-LEDs. So if I share my screen, and hopefully that'll work. I will assume it has worked until somebody tells me it hasn't. So the great thing about the Navigator is that it can be used by countries at any stage of NDC development. And to this effect, there are 3 key entry points that I'd like to highlight. So here I've got the home page. We can see that these entry points are visible up here in the top bar, but what I'll do is they're a bit clearer if I scroll down. So firstly, we have this entry, the first entry point being learn. So for countries who are just getting started, who might need to remind themselves of the context for NDC 3.0 and relevant UNFCCC decisions. We also have reflect, which provides an opportunity for countries to take stock of their needs and priorities. And it might be for those countries who are looking to get some inspiration of where in the Navigator they might want to start exploring. And then we have this explore entry point. So some countries might already have a really good idea of their priorities and what information they need. So they can jump straight into exploring the routes, opportunities in there, which is where the bulk of the tool lies. I know Tanique has really already given us a good introduction of the priorities for Jamaica, but for the purposes of showing how the tool can work, I think today we'll start in reflect. So Tanique, I will ask you a series of guiding questions that are over here. And with some luck, hopefully your answers will guide us towards some useful information. So before I get started with that, I'll just quickly introduce that these questions under the reflect section are split into 3 sections. So first we look back at the last NDC, then we'll take stock of present circumstances and needs and priorities that are currently existing in Jamaica. And then we'll have a look at future direction. And there are maybe 2 or 3 questions per section, but important to note that we don't actually have to answer every single one. If users are going through and finding that some are more useful than others, you're welcome to skip some and you will still be directed to what is hopefully a relevant route to you. So I will start here. So the first question, Tanique, is what were some of the most significant gaps and challenges in the last NDC? And we have a few options here. We have one around data and evidence and analytical work, one around costing measures, defining finance needs and identifying finance opportunities. The third one is around stakeholder engagement processes and getting buy-in from government. The fourth is on setting targets or raising the ambitions of targets, whether that means sort of raising the ambition of the economy-wide target or incorporating more sectors. We then have one about addressing adaptation and loss and damage, one about defining means of implementation, so support needs, capacity building needs, technology needs, and then the final one looking at incorporating just and equitable transition approaches. So do any of those speak to the Jamaican experience? And I'll click them in.
I would say I can speak on behalf of many small island developing states. Many of these may have been a challenge or a gap, but we find ways. But I would speak to the most significant ones that we may have had in terms of maybe costing measures, adaptation, loss and damage, and implementation, including capacity needs and technology needs.
Brilliant, thank you. So the next question, a little bit simpler, is in assessing the progress made on the last NDC, were any of the following significant barriers to targets and implementing actions? So the first one being around ownership and integration across government, second one being finance, third, data and information to track progress, or capacity building and technology. A bit similar to before.
Yeah, I should ask again, is it okay for me to pick more than one? Because,
yes.
Right, so data and information is always a problem in terms of being able to track and to get the data in the way that you need it, especially in the time, right? And capacity and accessing finance. I think I would choose those two.
Brilliant, thank you. So that concludes the looking back section. So now we'll have a quick look at present circumstances. And these are just a series of really short questions. So are any emissions in any sectors in Jamaica particularly high or growing?
Yes, I would assume the energy sector is still high. We're hoping that it's not growing, but we're hoping for a mix or net zero by 2050. So but it's there. So we're hoping that with all the things that we put in place now that it will go down. But yes, it's still high.
Brilliant. Good to hear for that ambition as well. So the second one, focus on adaptation. Are any climate hazards and risks currently experienced or expected to be in the future?
Well, of course, that's a given, yes.
I suspected that might be the answer. Are any populations negatively impacted or expected to be by the low carbon transition, climate resilience efforts, or alignment of finance flows in Jamaica?
Yes.
And are any potential negative impacts on populations yet to be identified or quantified?
Potential negative impacts on populations yet to be identified or quantified. I think we're in the process, so no.
Okay, brilliant. And have any new or updated plans and strategies, regulations, legislation been developed since the last NDC that should be taken into account? For example, NAPs, LEDS, and those sort of surrounding plans and processes.
Well, the thing is that we're in the process. I'm not, I can put the LTS for a fact because that will be tabled before, and they're using the draft of that to be able to inform the current NDCs. We're currently in the process of developing our NAP, but it's not yet completed, and I'm not sure it will be completed before we submit for NDCs. But we also have development plans and investment plans and financing strategies that you can also.
Brilliant. Yes, good to see that LEDS popped up, since that is why we're here today. Then two final questions on future direction. Are there any key technical or content areas that you're intending to prioritize for the NDC 3.0? whether that's mitigation targets, adaptation goals, or ensuring a just transition. You can pick all of them. You can pick one or two.
I couldn't be representing my boss or from the climate change division and not say strengthening mitigation targets. So that will be one, and also ensuring just and equitable transition.
Fantastic. And final question before we will see what routes we are recommended. Are there any key processes to support implementability that are intended to be prioritized in the NDC 3.0? So that might be understanding the financial landscape and opportunities to strengthen investment planning, enhancing the quality and technical evidence base of the NDC 3.0, engaging and integrating all of government and all of society in planning and implementing the next NDC, or increasing access to capacity and technology support.
It's very important for Jamaica's NDC to be based on the quality and technical evidence that is currently within our policies plans. So that is what it is based on. And then, of course, we make sure that we engage all of society. So those two, if I could put them in order, I would be like, enhancing quality, engaging stakeholders, and understanding financial landscape. Because we won't be able to do any of the implementation if it is that we don't have the financing and the support from government and also from our partners.
Absolutely. So if we click down here at the bottom, now that we've finished this quiz, it will hopefully show us the top recommended route for Jamaica. So hopefully if I scroll down, that will have popped up. Oh, no, it's at the top.
Okay.
Okay, there was a problem with my submission apparently. So in theory, that would work and it would show us a route that was hopefully targeted towards Jamaica's needs, priorities, and national circumstances. But since we don't have that much time, I will forego that and jump straight to where we expected to go. So since we're looking at NDC and LT LEDS alignment today, the alignment to 1.5, the aligned to Paris Agreed temperature goal is the route that we're going to want to explore a little bit further. So first, I'll start by introducing the structure of the page a little bit, and then we'll delve a little bit more into the information it contains, and we'll see whether that could be useful to Jamaica in developing the NDC 3.0 in a way that's aligned with the existing LT LEDS. So first on this page, we have the About section. So this introductory information here provides some information on why this route is important and the scientific basis for action. So you can see here that we include some links to relevant resources. In this instance, we've linked to the IPCC's 6th Assessment Synthesis report as a really good resource for understanding the scientific basis behind the cause for action in the mitigation area. We then have these two drop downs, the first of which is focused on the Paris Agreement and international context. So this one contains relevant paragraphs from the Paris Agreement and relevant UNFCCC decisions that help guide the mitigation components of NDCs. This second one, that's called Reflecting the Global Stocktake, includes some relevant outcomes from the first GST that can be reflected in NDCs 3.0. Following this, and if we use this left-hand panel, we can navigate a little bit easier through the page. There are some more guiding questions. Now, these are really similar to the ones we just went through, but with more mitigation focus and guiding us towards the specific opportunities under this route. But since we've just been through some of those, I will go straight to showing a bird's eye view of all the opportunities that are covered under this route. So the opportunities is where the bulk of the NDC Navigator's content sits. And as I say, here we can get a bird's eye view of all the topics that are covered under this route. Tanique, you noted that Jamaica is working on an investment plan to translate long-term goals into actionable projects. So before I jump into the opportunity that is very clearly about LT LEDS alignment, I wanted to quickly flag that we do have this opportunity called Exploring Sector-Specific Opportunities, which covers a range of opportunities at the sector level, which could be useful to explore if you're looking for inspiration on sectoral actions that could sort of help formulate those short-term actions that align to your long-term goals. But for the purposes of time, we will start here in the opportunity called Aligning the NDC with LT LEDS and Net Zero Goals. So if we click in here, we're taken to a page that looks quite similar to what we saw before. It's got a similar structure. The opportunity page starts with some introductory information about why aligning the NDC 3.0 to an LT-LEDS is important. It also includes, again, some information about what the first global stock take says about this. And then if we scroll down a little bit further, we'll get towards some of the information that can help guide how NDCs 3.0 are developed to leverage this opportunity. So we are presented with a range of strategies over here, which can help leverage the opportunity. As I say, they're often quite high level, and detailed guidance is then provided in a range of additional resources that are included further down on the page, which I will show in just a moment. Following on from these strategies, which introduce the ways in which the NDC could be aligned with the LT-LEDS, we have some country examples. So these are really useful ways of seeing how other countries have leveraged this opportunity. And we also link to sort of any resources that might provide a little bit more information on exactly how they've done that, or evidence in their NDCs that show that. And then if I scroll down just a bit further, we can see there are a range of further resources hosted under this opportunity. And this is where much of the value of the Navigator lies. As many of us will know, the team that were developing the Navigator collated a huge range of existing resources to support countries in their NDC development, and we categorized them into the various routes and opportunities that you see in the Navigator. So under each opportunity page, you will scroll down and you can see all of the further resources produced by a range of organizations. And in fact, we hope to continually update this. So we're hoping to see more things added as they are published. So for example, I really hope to see the publications demonstrated by Henri earlier appear here soon. And then finally, on every page, we have some information on how this links to other routes, and then we can navigate to the other opportunities that fall within this route. But since the best information to start with when we're looking for inspiration of how we can align the NDC with the LT-LEDS is captured under these strategies. So we can see that these strategies explore a range of ways that the NDC can be aligned with LT-LEDS. And in fact, they speak to many of the considerations mentioned by Henri earlier. So for example, this could be alignment in terms of targets. This could be alignment in terms of emissions trajectories. It could be in terms of a just transition to net zero. It could be alignment in terms of actions, alignment in terms of governance and stakeholder engagement. And then we have this strategy on providing information on how the NDC and LT-LEDS are aligned, and so that can be transparently communicated. So Tanique, reflecting on Jamaica's circumstances and priorities, do any of these strategies in particular jump out at you?
Well, of course, aligning with a just transition to net zero, because that is our goal, if not by 2050, 2060, the latest. And of course, aligning the NDC and LT-LEDS emissions trajectories. I think both of those are things that we're currently working on and with hopes to do. So it's also good for us to be able to have this resource so that we can also look at different examples, especially country examples, and to be able to look at some of the work that has already been done so that we can know that we are on the right track.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think those are going to be two really popular considerations. So I'll expand the first one as an example, and we can see the type of information you're presented with when you do so. So if I clicked here, we can see that we are faced with some brief high-level introductory information about how NDC could be aligned to just transition and net zero goals. And something I really want to highlight here is that we also, within the text, include some links to the other routes that might be relevant to leveraging this opportunity. So for example, it could be really important when sort of considering how the NDC could really incorporate just transition considerations to bring in the voices of lots of different people in society. So to that effect, there is a link here to a route that's called Mobilizes All of Government and All of Society. We could navigate directly to there and then explore a load of different opportunities and strategies for how we could do specifically that. Similarly, we have another route under the Navigator that is called Delivers a Just and Equitable Transition. So while the information here might be fairly high level, we could navigate to this route and we would find a lot more information and a lot of those further resources that I showed earlier that would allow a country to explore that in a lot more detail. And I know you also mentioned earlier that Jamaica is working on an investment plan. So I'm sure that investability, as it is with many countries, is a really key priority. And in fact, there is a strategy here, the one on providing information, that has a direct link to investability. So this strategy here mentions that sort of being really transparent about how the NDC and the LT-LEDs are aligned can help attract investment by ensuring sort of policy coherence is really clear to investors. So theoretically, if we wanted to explore that further and maybe explore some other opportunities on how we could make the NDC 3.0 more investable, we could also navigate to this route. And the reason I wanted to highlight this route is because it has just been released. It has been a long time in development. It is a really important one. And it's something that a lot of countries are flagging as a really key priority. And I guess I also wanted to highlight that this is another key feature of the Navigator, that all of the routes are really interlinked, and exploring one can lead you down a limitless range of other paths. So the key thing is really just to jump in and get started. And before I finish, actually, on that note, there should hopefully be another newly added feature to the Navigator, which is this search button up here. And that should hopefully allow us to jump straight to really direct information when we know exactly what we're looking for, without having to go through those entry points that I mentioned earlier. So for example, let's hope that this demonstration works better than my last one. If I typed in LT-LEDs, we would then see the different routes and opportunities that contain information on that. So hopefully that gives a bit of a brief introduction into how the Navigator could be used by different countries to sort of explore how to develop their NDC 3.0. And hopefully we found some useful information that's relevant to the context of Jamaica. So thank you so much, Tanique, for helping me with that.
Well, thank you, Maya, for navigating this for me, because honestly, I think this gives me more insight into how we can use these tools and how I can use these tools to help our focal points and other members in the government in their understanding of what it is that we are doing for Jamaica.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'll hand back to Julianne, I think.
Thank you, Maya. So we're going to move forward with the presentation by our colleague, Daniel Plug, and I hope I'm not butchering your name, Daniel. And going forward, he will be presenting to us on supporting good practices for LT-LEDs development from the ICI support project for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And I will be sharing my screen for you, Daniel. Over to you.
All right. Yeah, thanks very much. I hope you can hear me well. Yeah, thanks to the organizers for having me on this call. And yes, I'm happy to share with you how GIZ and specifically our project is engaging with the Global Call as an implementing partner, and also bringing in a bit the perspective of the German International Climate Initiative. And I'm also very happy to share initial insights from our forthcoming LT-LEDs good practice publication. But before I delve into the topic on the next slide, I would like to highlight a bit what our project is doing, or modes of delivery, very shortly. So we are commissioned by the Federal Ministry for Economy and Climate Action, as well as for the Foreign Office. And yeah, we're providing support and advisory service for these. Then we are supporting some global climate initiatives. One, obviously, the NDC Partnership, but we are also hosting the Secretariat of the Partnership on Transparency under the Paris Agreement, PATPA. And what we are looking today more into is the bilateral support for partner countries that we are providing. All of these three then also lead into a lot of knowledge management and knowledge dissemination that we do, for example, also together with NDC Partnership and UNDP via the Global NDC Conference and other events that we are hosting. On the next slide now, I would delve into the topic of the current support that we are providing under the global call, which is, as I said, obviously the topic of bilateral country support. So if you can change the slide, please. SPA engaged with the global call since its inception, and we also contributed conceptually to the global call when it started back then as a thematic call. Currently, we are active in 5 countries, which all filed requests through the global call, and some more are in the pipeline, and we still keep on reviewing new requests from other countries to support them further. So for the current support, we are having Kenya as one country where we support the LEDS investment plan and the alignment with the NDC investment plan. This is part of a bigger request, and we are working, as in all countries, closely with our country colleagues on the delivery. Then we have Nigeria, where we support the development of Nigeria's net zero investment plan. This is a full support. And as Nigeria has just, under the last circulation round, filed another request on NDC stock take update and the investment plan, we are also looking into that to create potential synergies with the support that we are already doing under the net zero investment plan. We're supporting Mauritania also on the development of a long-term carbon development strategy, LEDS. And that is a very important document for Mauritania, as this is already set to attract further international funding for their climate actions. In South Africa, we are supporting the second NDC, again, closely working with in-country colleagues and other stakeholders in the country. And we are also coordinating with other partners like the 2050 Pathways platform on the support for the LEDS, which is also currently developed. So there's a strong alignment under the global call, which we are involved in. Finally, Costa Rica. There we are supporting the NDC, and yeah, this is also a partial support for a bigger request, and currently the NDC roadmap is being developed by UNEP. Now on the next slide, I'm diving more into the good practice for LEDS development knowledge product, which is upcoming, which we are very excited about, and this should be finalized by October. This knowledge product highlights good practices of LEDS development and its contributions to NDC 3.0. And we are developing this on the request of our commissioning parties, which shows the importance and priority that Germany places on keeping LEDS alignment as a particular priority when it comes to alignment with the NDC 3.0s. The core of the document are actually country examples that have demonstrated 4 key components of a comprehensive LEDS. And which you can see on this slide. I have to say that I'm not one of the authors of this publication, so all credits definitely go to those that are working on this publication from our team. They have conducted several interviews with 7 countries to reflect on the processes and success factors when they developed their LEDS. And they interviewed, among others, also Jamaica, and we already heard a lot about that. The interviews took place between May and August this year. As we heard earlier, there are 72 countries that have submitted already their LEDS. So this selection we did was based on the submissions to UNFCCC and the regional focus. Clearly, this is not an extensive list of countries, but a handful of selected ones. As I already said, the interviews found 4 components for comprehensive LEDS, which stood out most. The first one is on a robust long-term vision which means that the LTLEDS is based on a strategic vision that takes into account the country key objectives and priorities. And this obviously should go beyond the climate sphere to make it a meaningful document for the development of a country as a whole. To achieve the second component, this component highlights the strong alignment with national goals and policies. And this means that a full alignment with the NDC, or for example, decarbonization strategies and development goals, is necessary, and that it is important to embed the LTLEDs in a broader country context, which also should include expertise from a wide variety of stakeholders. Then the third component looks at effective governance and stakeholder engagement, which is closely aligned to the second component then. And the fourth component looks at the financial basis, for example, in form of an investment plan, including a wide variety of funding sources, and also including a thorough analysis on economic impacts of the LTLEDs. And therefore, it's also very important to get the Ministry of Finance on board as soon as possible. Now, I would like to give a glimpse on best practices using different country examples, starting on the next slide with the first component, which I just mentioned, the robust long-term vision. And here I will start with an example of Georgia, which included a new commitment to carbon neutrality in its LTLEDS 2050. And this was definitely important for them, as this led to a higher attraction from international development partners, financial organizations, and also leveraged a broader in-country buy-in. Nigeria also changed its previous more aspirational long-term vision to a clear framework with a specific net zero goal for 2060. Which made the LTLEDs much more tangible. Then looking at South Africa, they have included in their vision statement a commitment to a just transition and also to resilience building. And thereby they explicitly link climate action with social equity. And this makes the vision inclusive and embedded in the broader development framework of the country. So from these first examples, the key elements are that a robust long-term vision is needed. And this is also mirroring quite well the outcomes of the global stocktake, which Henri also alluded to, that is an important part of alignment to take into account the global stocktake outcomes. It includes economy-wide emission reductions and using sector-specific transformation pathways. And besides mitigation, obviously adaptation targets need to be included, and concrete measures for the medium and long term need to be defined. All of this then should obviously be grounded in robust science and should align with the Paris Agreement goals. On the next slide, better on the next two slides, they are at the core of today's exchange because they really look at the alignment of national goals and policies. And here again, I have a couple of country examples to showcase the considerations and benefits of alignment. Starting with Nigeria, and we heard that already before today, the alignment of data sets and model was what they were looking at, as well as involving the same stakeholder in their climate policies development. And we all know that this approach can save scarce resources, help preserve knowledge, especially with local institutions, and also enhance the ownership of a climate policy document, be it the LTLEDs or an NDC. We already heard about Jamaica, that they also have a good team around, and they foresee to keep the country experts engaged for future climate policy updates, for example, the 2035 NDC. Thailand took quite an interesting approach because they iteratively revised its NDC on the basis of the long-term targets. And that also involved the update of the Climate Change Act. And with this alignment, they assured that key policies and targets also included socioeconomic development strategies and were guiding climate mainstreaming into all sectors. So coherence of necessary building blocks for climate policies and alignment of the models and data sets used, as well as institutional arrangement and coordinated periodic revisions, are first key takeaways for this here. On the next slide, I continue with the alignment bit, and they're similar to Thailand. Rwanda has integrated environment and climate indicators into all sectoral strategies, allowing for comprehensive reporting on climate policy implementation and informing the NDC and LEDS tracking without contradictions between the processes, which is quite important for those that work, for example, on the biannual transparency reports. The Climate Change Act in South Africa created, on the one hand, a legislative mandate and also determined roles and responsibilities at all levels for climate policy, including just transition aspects. And this elevates the harmonization of climate development policies. Then the example of Kazakhstan is quite interesting, as they gave their LEDs the status of a key policy document. And this means that all other policy documents need to align to the LEDs overall objective. Again, here the key aspect is the participation of the same stakeholders, approaches, and scenarios in building up the LEDs. So to summarize, it's key to have scenarios that consider interactions between climate and sustainable development. And this also includes the just dimensions and linking clearly to economic development, which needs streamlining with sectoral strategies and action plans. As alluded earlier, aligned and effective governance and stakeholder engagement is a key aspect for comprehensive LEDs. If this is done effectively, the collaboration can lead to a meaningful transformation with broad ownership. Here, quickly, two examples. The Department of Climate Change and Environment in Thailand is the central coordinating department that ensures the alignment of sectoral ministries, as well as appliance with climate targets. So this then includes dedicated climate teams who receive regular and mandatory climate capacity buildings and onboardings. And this finally leads to a robust institutional structure with fixed procedures, which is very helpful for aligned documents. Kazakhstan went quite far by gathering 90 organizations and stakeholders for around 170 meetings for different topic areas, and thereby they gained diverse views and expertise for its LEDs. For this component, key are clear coordination procedures and engagement between science and policy, which in the best case should build on institutional capacities to avoid a loss of knowledge with policy document update cycles. On the last slide, and very shortly, not because of importance, but in the interest of time, I would like to finish with one country example, because Jamaica already was mentioned with their investment plan. So here I would just highlight then Rwanda, which has introduced a system of climate budget tagging. And this holds all levels and sectors of policymaking accountable on how climate indicators are integrated in their budget. And this is tracked via a centralized system and thereby ensuring an effective financial foundation for the LEDs. In summary, the involvement of financial actors into the development of LEDs should happen at the earliest stages already, and clearly define priorities to have robust cost estimations. Also, taxonomies, climate budget tagging, and incorporation of the assessment of climate risks are key for this component. I hope this input was valuable and gave a good overview on how alignment of good practices of LEDs development inherently include also the alignment with other climate policies, especially NDCs, and that they also need to go beyond the climate sphere. And also, I think it's interesting to see how many countries already found their innovative ways to ensure that the key components for this are considered in their LT-LEDs development. Yes, with this, thanks a lot. I will end this presentation and hand over back to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for that presentation, and thank you to all of our panelists that we've had throughout the webinar today. We now have about 10 minutes for question and answer from the audience. So if you would like to ask a question, we ask that you put that question in the Q&A function rather than in the chat, so that we can see the list of questions as they pop up. But if you are having trouble with the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen right next to the chat, you can also put them in the chat and we will address them there. But as of right now, I do not see any questions from our audience at this point. So please add in your questions. We hope to be able to answer them. Okay, great. I see a question here. I believe that this is addressed to Daniel here about, can you tell some more details about the Rwanda experience?
Well, as I said, I was not part of the authors team, so also not participating in the interviews. But I mean, in general, what Rwanda did was to use mandatory checklists for all sectors, and also for district budgets, and then include climate indicators in their sectoral strategies and annual action plans. And yeah, with this environment and climate monitoring statements for the ministries were created. And yeah, so in the end, it is for central and district public agencies to really explain how their budget integrates climate indicators. And that is what they call climate budget tagging. And yeah, I mean, having a centralized system for spending public money and a complementary tool for tracking non-public finance is also under development. So this is what Rwanda is doing, and I think it's a very innovative and good approach to really see that whenever it comes to budget, it is important, no matter what the sector is or where we are looking at, that climate is always there and climate is considered. And what we know, especially when it comes to LT-LEDs, that this is super important for investors that are looking a bit more into the long term, to have a clear view on what is needed and what is spent. And so I think that's the basis for Rwanda's example here.
Great, thank you so much for that response. Any other questions? Oh, great. We have another question in the Q&A. Thank you for that. So what were the major challenges in the implementation of LT-LEDs? This seems to be a bit of a more general question. So is there anyone from our panel that would like to answer about challenges in implementing LT-LEDs? And it could be more than one of you.
I can jump in very briefly here and just say that hearing at the NDC 3.0 forums, we did notice that one of the big challenges is when you have different mandates on who's developing the long-term strategy versus who's developing the NDCs, and having those align, and how many of these instruments that are actually interrelated that might relate to things like the National Adaptation Plan, or like nature-based solutions models that are being developed, or things like that. If they are centralized in different governments, it becomes very challenging to actually have one cohesive strategy or policy. And there was a lot of emphasis on these processes being more sustainable when there is an overarching framework that guides these processes. And most countries actually that spoke about an overarching framework. We're speaking specifically about a legal structure, so a climate change law that has that mandate that addresses that. But I wonder if we could have perhaps Tanique might be able to address also from Jamaica's experience what challenges they may have run into. So the question, do you mind repeating the question here, Sarah? Or so the question is, what were major challenges in the implementation of long-term strategies?
Morning again, everyone. Well, I wouldn't say, because we have not yet started the implementation of the strategy. We do have an implementation plan. And as such, as soon as the plan is tabled in cabinet, which we are hoping to be tabled within the next week or two, we will start. But what we have been doing is that all the consultants, everyone working on the various different strategies, plans, that everything that we're doing is aligned. And then based on the various consultations that we've been having with the stakeholders, we've been making everyone apprised of the actions to come. And based on, for us, it was important also to be able to cost the actions before we actually even started the implementation, because we knew that it was a lot of the actions were going to be conditional on us receiving support from our partners. And as such, we knew that it was going to be necessary for us to be able to provide costing, or to be able to provide the exact initiatives that were going to be done. So all of that will be rolled out in short order as soon as this starts. And I think there will be some momentum building based on the fact that we're now in the NDC process, and that we will actually have something to put on the table. So we have not yet, but we already envision that there will be a lot of public awareness that will be necessary to be able to push these actions that have been put forth, because it's going to take quite a bit of a transition for everyone in the country to be able to achieve these goals of 100% by 2050. So that is something that we know, but we are preparing for. So I know that doesn't exactly, but just to know that we do have an operationalization plan for the LTS, which I do think is quite important. So that is also something that countries should take into consideration when developing an LTS, that you also develop a plan to implement upon those actions that were highlighted in the LTS, and to probably also think about making sure that you cost those elements and for investment. So all of those things, I think, all come hand in hand. So that is how we are moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Tanique, for that experience. And Henri, it seems you would like to weigh in on this as well. And we were also hoping if you could elaborate on the other question in the chat about NDC LT-led alignment, and elaborating on the NDCs and combining them with LT-LEDs.
Yeah, thanks. So just to follow up on what was said by Julian and Tanique, it's that I think that there is a critical challenge in that a lot of the capacity to implement the LTS depends on how the LTS was developed. And it's critical that the development of the LTS is done with clearly in mind that it's meant to be implemented, and that it's not only meant to be a report submitted somewhere in the UNFCCC website and disregarded afterwards. And the reason why I'm saying that is that depending on how you develop the LTS, it will be either straightforward or very challenging to turn the LTS into implementation. So there are some requirements when you develop your LTS, notably in terms of the level of detail you provide. If you provide only a broad picture, then just, for example, emission numbers without going into the granularity and the details of the underlying transformation, it's very challenging to turn that into transformations that eventually can lead to concrete implementation. If you only display a long-term perspective without clarifying the different steps that are required to go there, it's a work in itself to turn it into implementation. So what I mean here is that if you consider in the process of the LTS that it's effectively meant to be implemented, then you will develop it slightly differently. And that's kind of the spirit of what I wanted to, of what I presented earlier, which is these key features of what the LTS should be made for will define to what extent it can be implemented. And that links to this question of the NDC LTS alignment. Ideally, in principle, you would first have your LTS serve as a reference, and then the NDC being developed as notably milestones to achieve the LTS. Then obviously we know that in the countries, it's not necessarily how the process is organized, but the question at least of the, considering the need for coherence between the process when you have an LTS process on the one hand and an NDC process on the other hand, making sure that there are some structural exchanges between these two processes is really critical, because otherwise you can face a risk that the two things are disconnected. And ideally, the LTS should guide the NDC and not the other way around, because that's the condition for the NDC to really be the first steps towards the long-term changes that are required. But that can work only if the two processes have some processes that allow the confrontation of the insights emerging from the two processes when they are developed independently, which will be the case in most countries.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Henri, for that answer. And I see that we are a little bit over time at this point, so thank you to everyone who was able to ask a question. I know we have one remaining in the Q&A here. If there are any panelists that want to reply via text, that would be great as well. But for everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar on NDC and LT LEDS alignment. We will be sharing all of the resources as well as the recording of this webinar once it is uploaded to our YouTube channel. So please stay tuned for an email from us, and we look forward to having you at our next webinar. If you would like to find out more information about that one, it is related to NDCs and health, and you can find information on the NDC Partnership website, but I will also put that in the chat here for you as well, so that you can directly register. And with that, thank you so much to our panelists for being able to join us today and providing your insights. It has been great listening to you. So thank you so much again.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.